is Pietro. I'm an iOS engineer working in N26 in the growth segment of the company. So focusing on user verification. And this, it works. This is the first thing an iOS engineer sees after joining our company. And the iOS handbook is basically and foremost the source of truth for every discussion inside our team. And the first chapter talks about how we deal with dependencies, git ignore, how we split our app into modules, and typical stuff. But the second chapter talks about how we test our application. And it's not a short chapter, it has more than 15 sub-chapters, so it's a lot of things. But why should we do such a thing in our company? Well, it's not that we write tests just for testing, of course. The main reason behind focusing on testing, so testing comes first, is because we are dealing with customers' money. And money is a touchy subject, and it's important to people. So when we want to ship new features, release to release, we want to make sure that we don't break stuff while building new features. Otherwise, people will get into financial troubles. And of course, we don't want that. So we want to be confident that the things will not break while we develop. And so the first thing we can think about as individuals, in order to be confident while shipping features, is to rely on manual testing. For testing our UI, to test our flows, test user interaction, etc. And why we do that? We do this because we trust people and we trust ourselves, of course. But things don't always go so smoothly. So, for example, when we are dealing with UI testing, we need to make sure, of course, that every feature works on every possible device. So iPhone SE and so on. So every possible screen ratio. And it's very common, even in our company, that, for example, some testers booked the last available iPhone 7, so we don't have time to test the UI on a proper physical device for that screen ratio. And yeah, I mean, we can do much better than that. Manual testing should focus on actual user interaction, not UI testing. So one framework we use in our company that we saw it works very well for UI validation and UI testing is called Snapshot Testing. And Snapshot Testing is used in our company when we want to be sure that the UI doesn't change unexpectedly while we develop new features. And we are using an open source library developed by Point3. Maybe you know them. And yeah, it's available on GitHub publicly, so if you want to check it out. But let's see how it works. So the thing that this library does is the following. When we create a snapshot test, the first time we run the snapshot test, a new image gets created, and it's stored in our repository. This image is called a reference image. So it's called a reference image because all the following runs of the same snapshot test will record a new image, and it will confront this image with the reference one. So if the snapshot test sees that the newly taken snapshot is exactly the same as the reference image, the test is marked as successful. Instead, even if there's a slight change in the UI, in the new snapshot, newly recorded to the reference image, the test will fail. So in order to explain it simply, it's basically a pixel comparison tool. So let's say that our snapshot test failed. What should we do now? So the thing we need to ask ourselves is, was this change expected or not? So if we changed something intentionally in our code base, for example, I've updated my corner radius of all the images in our code base. This is an intentional thing. So it's good that our snapshot test failed because it captured an update in our UI. So what should I do? The thing we do when the change was expected is the following. We let the framework record the reference image again. What happens when the change wasn't expected? So if the change wasn't expected, it means that we touched something in our code base that we weren't supposed to touch. So the change was, we unintentionally changed something in our code base. And this is a good thing because the framework captured an involuntary change in our code base. So we can get back to our code base and fix the problem. And snapshot testing can perform this comparison just because the actual result of these snapshot tests are files. In our particular case, the files are stored as PNG, but actually the framework, since it's called snapshot testing and not screenshot testing, can actually compare many different formats. For example, text files, even videos or markdowns, basically any file format you can think of. But for our use case, of course, we use PNGs. And those PNGs are stored inside our code base. And speaking from a developer perspective, since when we develop new features, we have to record snapshot tests for every new UI update we do. It means that during pull requests, when we review new PRs, we can instantly see what this new feature will look like, even without opening Xcode, waiting for the app to build again, opening the simulator, and finally watch the feature. So actually, it's a very important tool, even during PR reviews. And this is a crucial step. Because remember, snapshot testing is based on reference images. It means that and the reference images are the source of truth. It means that if you record a wrong reference image, it means that you are committing a false source of truth. It means that if you're going to fix your UI in the future, the snapshot test will fail, of course, because the source of truth is wrong. So this is an important thing to take into consideration. And getting back to the technical side, just for a little bit, these are the only 3 lines of code required for writing a snapshot test. So as you can see here, we inject our dependencies into a view model, and then we call the function from the framework. And just to mention, the snapshot tests are as fast as unit tests. So they have nothing to do with XCUI tests, which is another framework for another purpose. Snapshot tests are testing the layout of our application, not the user interaction of the application. So yeah, now I planned a showtime, but my MacBook is there, so I have to jump here. So I've built a small, yeah. Oh no, it's fine. I've built a small application, test application, that we can see here, containing just a homepage with a title, a subtitle, if it works, a title, a subtitle, and a button. And I've also written 2 snapshot tests for this this page here. So, like I said before, it's super laggy. Sorry, it should work. So in the meantime, okay, the presentation is not over, but I guess if you have already some questions you want to ask, please. Yeah. So the question is if we are running A/B tests for snapshot tests. Snapshot tests for A/B tests. You mean testing a screen with 2 different configurations? So, like I said, since we are injecting our dependencies, it means that a screen can have multiple possible layout formats. So let's say we have a Boolean saying the screen will appear in this form or in the other form. And of course, we should record 2 different snapshot tests for 2 different view models. So yeah, yeah, we are writing A/B tests for snapshot tests for A/B tests. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For technical reason, unfortunately, I have to skip my demo. I'm very sorry. But yeah, a cool thing that I wanted to show you, but unfortunately I cannot show you, is that with this framework, not only it tells you when your snapshot test fails, but also it gives you a tool for diffing the 2 images. So you can instantly see exactly where, in which pixels your test failed. With yeah, it's basically a diff between 2 images. I was gonna remove the button from our move the button a little bit from my snapshot test, and the diff of this snapshot test would tell me, hey, you moved this button by 10 pixels, fix it, or commit a new reference image. And another cool thing that I want to add when using this framework is that it forces you to isolate code better in your application. Because if you don't inject dependencies, if you don't use dependency injections for your view controllers or for your views, the snapshot test will be flaky. So let's say you have a date inside your view controller, a label that displays a date. If you don't inject that date correctly, the result of the snapshot test will change depending on when you run the test. So if I run that at 9 a.m., I will have a snapshot. But if I run it at 5 p.m., I will have a totally different snapshot, and it will fail on your local machine, on your CI, and that's it. So it's a good thing. So yeah. In the end, like I said, writing snapshot tests is fairly easy. It takes 3 lines of code. The method taken from the library is pretty self-explanatory. And right now it's the only way we found in order to automate the UI testing without relying on actual physical people. And yeah, like the important thing to remember is that it's not a silver bullet. So snapshot testing, is the perfect tool to test and validate layouts. It's not built for testing user interactions, navigations, or testing business logic. You shouldn't test your business logic with snapshot tests. But yeah, when you focus on just layout testing, it's the perfect tool, and we use it happily. Another maybe issue we found when dealing with snapshot tests is animations. So for example, if you have a UI activity indicator or some animations going on in your view, you have to be sure that the animation are disabled. Or if you cannot disable them, at least you have to wait for them to finish and then record the snapshot. But yeah, far from those problems and the problems I mentioned before about the repo size, it's a great tool. We suggest you to try it. And yeah, thanks. Time for questions.
Okay, thank you guys. If you have any questions, please.
Okay, first, yeah. So the question was, how do we deal with the status bar, right, for snapshot tests? So the way snapshot testing works, it doesn't actually take a screenshot from the device, but actually it renders the view with some magic, I would say, in the frame. But actually, it's an open source framework. You can actually take a look on how do they perform the recording, but it's not a screenshot. So maybe in some use cases it's a problem because you actually want to record the status bar, but I think you can find a workaround. Right now we didn't have this problem, but yeah.
Thank you.
So okay, yeah.
Snapshot test on.
So the question is how many devices do we run our snapshot test on? And the answer is that we're actually using a wrapper around this library. So it's very easy to build a wrapper and saying that, okay, the framework normally records just one image. But with a wrapper, you can easily record 3 images, 1 for every screen ratio. So for example, we are recording an image for iPhone SE, iPhone 7, and iPhone 10. So 3 different screen ratios. So we don't support iPads. Sorry.
How you deal with merge conflicts?
Good question. So how do we deal with merge conflicts? This is another downside that I forgot to mention. So if you have merge conflicts with snapshot tests, the only way to solve them is to actually record again the reference images for the affected files. There's no other way around, unfortunately. So it takes a little bit of time if you have thousands of snapshot tests, and then you have to make sure that all the reference images are correct. Because like I said, if you're going to upload a wrong source of truth, your test will go, even if your test pass, your UI will be wrong. So
you have to sit together with both people who having the merge conflict to...
no, actually, you record the snapshot test from your machine if you're trying to solve the merge conflict, and then you push a commit with the updated reference images. Yeah. Questions from above.
Are you using, what are you using to test flows? Are you also using snapshot testing, or are you using also XUI tests or something like that?
So this is a good question. So the question is, where, if I understood correctly, where do we place snapshot tests in our pyramid of testing, so to say? So let's say that we use snapshot tests as a middleware between unit tests and integration tests. So because we are actually validating the layout of our screens, but we're not validating user interactions. So yeah, we also use XCUI tests as an integration solution, but yeah, snapshot tests are a middleware, so to say. They stay in the middle. Yeah. Thanks. Another question from above there.
Hello. So I have two connected questions, basically. First one is I didn't really understand how you choose the reference images.
Okay, so the question is, how do we choose the reference images, right? So the thing is that the first time you run a snapshot test, it will fail. It will fail because it's just recorded the reference image. So if the framework doesn't find the reference image in the specified directory, it's going to create it. And from the starting from the following runs, it will the test will find the path of your file and will treat it as a reference image. So the reference images are recorded the first time the test doesn't find the file, and then it just compares new images with the reference one.
And from experience, how often do you have like false positives? So that there's an error, but actually it's fine, or your reference image is wrong.
Actually, we had some problems with iOS 13 when updating our code base to Xcode 11, so in order to build with the iOS 14 SDK. There were some flakiness around the shadows, for example, and fonts, because for some reason the San Francisco font changed in between test runs by a slight pixel. So yeah, flakiness happens, especially when dealing with shadows. And especially when upgrading iOS from an iOS version to another. But once you solve those problems for the new iOS version, you should be good for at least 1 year. Yeah.
And is at some point designers or QA involved in the reference images, basically?
So actually, unfortunately, we have so many snapshot tests across our code base. And the code base is modular, so different teams own different part of the code base. Unfortunately, we don't involve designers in the snapshot test process, but we should. It's an improvement that we should definitely do, because especially if you're working in a small company where you have much less snapshot tests, it's very easy to just zip them and send to the designers in order to check them, because it's literally the representation of your application in a PNG file. Every screen should be represented by a PNG, and it's a great opportunity to share knowledge between the design team and the engineering team. So definitely, but currently we don't do it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other one? Oh no, sorry. Maybe. Yeah. Sorry.
Someone,
Oh, this one.
in which layer you mocked your things, in HTTP layer down there or somewhere more on the top?
So since you are testing views, it means that views have a view model that needs to be injected. So we are mocking things for snapshot testing. We are mocking things on at the view model layer. But of course, if we talk about unit tests or something else, we are mocking things on other layers. Yeah. Thanks.
So you mentioned that you took a whole snapshot of the whole screen, I guess, with the framework. Or is it possible to take like a separate snapshot of a table view cell, for example? So which one do you do? Like the whole screen or?
So repeat the question.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
No, maybe, okay, no worries. So the question, the question was if we just take snapshot tests of a whole UI view controller, or if we also take them for single views, single cells. Is it right? Yeah. So actually, the beauty of this framework is that we can both snapshot UI view controllers and UI views and actually all the elements you want. So currently in our code base, yes, we have a snapshot test for view controllers, but mainly we have snapshot tests for every single UI element. So every single button in our design system, every single title, cell, or body, whatever, container, everything is snapshot tested at the UI view level. So it's possible, yeah. Thanks.
Some more questions?
This guy here, stairs.
Hi. How do you deal with accessibility? For example, testing different font sizes. Do you have a separate reference image for each different font size?
So actually, unfortunately, you know the answer. Right now, we are not dealing with dynamic font sizes, unfortunately, but the framework is built in a way that if you build your wrapper around it, of course, you can decide, okay, for this screen, I want to record 5 different snapshots, 1 for every font size, for example, or I don't know. You can play a lot with the framework.
So would it be possible to do something like a matrix, for example, 5 different screen sizes, 5 different font sizes, but also light and dark mode, which would add up to like 20 images?
Definitely, yeah, you can do it. You just have to be aware that if you upload 20 PNG files for every UI element of your code base, of course, it's gonna increase the repo size. So yeah, but it's definitely it's possible, and yeah, it depends on your use case, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Last one.
How you do a snapshot test if the element is outside of the view when you have to scroll down?
So actually, if you're talking about a cell, maybe you're talking about cells or just
when you have a product details page or something like that, and you have to scroll down for at least 100 more pixels, and there is a recommendation down there, for example, or something like that.
So, like I said, the framework doesn't take an actual screenshot of the screen, but it's actually rendering the whole view.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm gonna take a snapshot for a 2,000 long pixel or whatever unit, pixel unit UI view, it's gonna take a 2,000 long pixel image. So yeah, it's not a problem.
Thank you.
Thanks. A lot of questions.
You tell only about images. What about text and data? Do you use Snapshot for that or not?
No. So actually, we just use snapshot tests currently just for PNG images. We are not testing text or data with snapshot tests. Usually, in order to test data or business logic, we use standard Xcode unit tests or quick and nimble. But yeah, so we just limit the use of this framework for layout because we saw that it works fine for this use case. We didn't explore any other opportunities so far with snapshot testing. So yeah.
And one more question. So what's wrong in your iOS handbook with point 5, 6, and 10?
I won't go back to the slide. No.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Did you try to somehow separate the snapshots from the code, like to keep it somewhere in the separate repo or something like this?
So our repo is our code base is a mono repo currently. So every module is inside a single repo stored on GitHub. So we didn't try it, but it could be a solution. Still, you are uploading a huge amount of PNG images somewhere. So you just have to decide where to put them. I would say, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess we have it's enabled otherwise. Yeah.
So I just want to confirm that you said that this snapshot testing is as fast as unit testing, so it's running somehow headless. It doesn't spin up the simulator or something like this, right? Okay.
Correct. So I didn't have the opportunity to show you, but it's literally instant. So it's instant because actually the framework gives you the opportunity to choose the precision of the pixel comparison. So if you use a 100% precision, it will be instant. But if you use a 70% precision, it means that for a single snapshot test, it will take like 1 minute, or yeah, it's not feasible. But yeah, you can run, I guess, 100 of snapshot tests in less than 20 seconds. Yeah, even less. Yeah. Like I said, as fast as unit tests.
So,
okay, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Pietro.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.